The time has finally come where Tommy Aspinall gets the fight for the undisputed heavyweight title after not only winning the interim championship, but also defending the interim championship. This Saturday, we got the annual UFC pay-per-view offering in Abu Dhabi, UFC 321. I'm going to go through all the fights. I'm going to give you my early thoughts, my early lean on each and every one of the matchups that we got on this Saturday's card. This is before I go deep into the tape study. You know, we're coming hot off of UFC Vancouver last night. I'm filming this Sunday morning. I got all the matchups. We know some about these fighters already. We're pretty familiar with these fighters, whether they're men or women. So I can kind of see how the fight would go before I dive into the tape, before I check all the boxes. And then later in the week, I'll give you my official picks and most confident ranked as well. But before we get into the breakdowns the early breakdowns for UFC 321, we got to recap how UFC Vancouver went. Didn't go that bad. Honestly, there's a ton of underdogs that came through, and I cashed one of the underdogs that I picked as well in Arichi Long. But overall, we're positive 1.14 units on the straight bets and the parlays, and we made 0 on the DFS plays because we went 1 and 2 on the slips, so that is a net 0. So overall, we're positive 1.14 units on the night. Now we're positive 75.52 units on the year. And we've been stacking some wins almost every single week. And actually 10 straight weeks that we've been profitable. So overall, not a huge night at UFC Vancouver, but it was another profitable one. And that continues the streak up to 10 UFC events in a row where we've been in the green. So we've been on a nice long streak. I'm not upset about winning 1.14 units compared to, losing. Exactly. So it wasn't a huge night, but another profitable one nonetheless. If you want all my bets, jump in the Home 5 Picks Premium membership. Link down in the description below. I'm probably going to have maybe some early bets for UFC 321. And then, of course, we got the DFS plays that'll be sent out to you guys earlier in the week. But enough of that. Let's get into the fights. We got the first fight of the night. Looks like it's going to be a women's MMA. As usual, we got Jacqueline Amorim coming in at a minus 450, taking on Mizuki Inoue. Now, Inoue comes in as a plus 350 dog, and I didn't think this girl was still on the roster. She's 2-1 in the UFC, but she's not very active. She's been off for like 2 years. She had fought a ton of UFC girls before she even got into the UFC and was pretty competitive with most of them, giving them tough fights. She lost to Verna Jandiroba, Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Her only loss in the UFC is Amanda Lemos, but her last fight was 2 years ago against Hannah Goldie. Hannah Goldie is just not really UFC level, and anyway, won that fight, but it wasn't like some crazy performance from her. Amorim, on the other hand, definitely going to be the more hyped up fighter coming into this one, and I expected her to be a favorite. I expected her to be a pretty sizable favorite because she is a pure finisher. All of her wins come by finish, and if you're a finisher in women's MMA, that means you're usually levels above these girls. And is she going to be a level above Mizuki Inoue? Yeah, I think so. But I don't know that she's just going to run through her because Inoue is pretty solid, man. She's pretty solid. Now, these stats are definitely off. Graphics guy got that one wrong. But Inoue, I don't think she's ever been finished. If I have to remember correctly, I don't think she's ever been finished. So it might be tough for Amorim to get her out of there. But if there is a girl that could finish Inoue on the ground, it's probably Amorim. Verna Jandiroba didn't, but Amorim, I think, has pretty dangerous jiu-jitsu. She's so long. She's at 68-inch reach, and her long limbs compared with her jiu-jitsu skills on the ground, it is tough to not only survive on the ground, but it's tough to not stay on the ground after she gets you down. She got a decent decent single leg that she'll drag you down to the ground with. Decent clinch game as well, trips. On the feet, she's obviously not great, but I don't think she really needs to be on the feet against Inoue to win this fight. I think she can get it down to the ground. I think she's going to win. I think she can maybe get a late finish again, but I think Jacqueline gets it done nonetheless. So I'm going to lean towards the big favorite side and Amorim to get this one done in the first fight of the night. Let's go to fight number 2. Got Azat Maksum taking on Mitch Raposo. Mitch Raposo, 0-2 in the UFC, has really done nothing for my liking to make me impressed, man. His first fight against Andre Lima didn't really do much. Against Sumiderci didn't really do much. The guy just doesn't land any damage. he doesn't really do anything with his takedowns. He's not a bad wrestler, but he gets the takedowns and you just can't do anything with him because he doesn't really have much of a jiu-jitsu game. As at Maksum, on the other hand, 1-2 in the UFC, so he's got a UFC win, but it was a close fight against Tyson Nam in his UFC debut. And then he fights Charles Johnson, he loses. And then he fights, Tagir Ulanbekov. I think that was in Abu Dhabi earlier this year. Or maybe it was Baku. Maybe it was Azerbaijan. But either way, he lost to Tagir Ulanbekov as a big underdog, but he gave him a tough fight and arguably could have won that fight. As at Maksum, kind of a wild card, man. Like, he's tall and lengthy for the weight class. I think his striking is solid. I think his offensive wrestling is just kind of eh. I think his defensive wrestling is getting better. You know, he wasn't just ragdolled by Ulanbekov, which is a good sign, but he's also still, you know, losing minutes in that fashion. I think Maksum's probably going to get it done because I think he's probably the better striker here. I don't think Mitch Raposo is going to be able to implement a wrestling pace to where it's going to win him minutes on the ground because he doesn't really do any damage with it. So I think Maksum's the rightful favorite. I think Maksum could probably win this fight by decision. I don't really see him getting a finish. I guess maybe if he lands some massive shot, but Mitch Raposo doesn't really do much to like put himself into harm's way to where Maksum is going to make him pay for it. So I'm going to take Maksum here for the early pick. I think he's the much better fighter. I mean, he's fought the better level of competition, and he's like I said, he's a little bit of a wild card. You never really know what you're going to get with him on that night, but I think on this night, even if he's not the best that he could be, I think he could still squeak by with a win. So give me Maksum for the early pick. Let's move on. Disgusting. And I'm not talking about the images on my screen, but I'm also just, you know, talking about how this fight looks. All right, so we got Hamdi Abdelwahab coming in at minus 350, taking on Chris Beast Boy Barnett. Now, Barnett, this is like the freak show, man. Chris Barnett was in Abu Dhabi last year against Kennedy Nzechukwu, and he blew out his leg. I don't know if it was knee or his ankle by throwing a spinning wheel kick or a spinning heel kick. I don't know what the fuck it's called. He blew out his knee. I think it was his knee from a spinning heel kick and ultimately got TKO because the guy could barely stand. It's because he's fat as shit. All right, it's because he's fat as shit. And I don't know what I think these guys in Abu Dhabi wanted him back because they're like, there's no fucking way. There's no way this dude is in the UFC. There's no way. I've never seen anything like it. Just a short, fat, black guy who's balding, who's semi-athletic, but he's so fat he blew out his knee. We need to see him back here. But we can't bring him back against, you know, a guy that he could maybe beat. So, is there anybody that Chris Barnett can't beat, honestly? Is there any? Hamdi Abdelwahab is clearly the guy that the Abu Dhabis would want to win. So they're going to give him Chris Barnett, who's absolutely terrible. Hamdi's not very good either. He's 4-1. He just lost to Muhammad Usman earlier this year, and not really exactly like a fighter that you want to lose to if you're going to be anything in the UFC. But I think Hamdi's going to get this one done. He's just faster, better striker, better wrestler, probably better cardio as well. So Hamdi's going to be the pick because Barnett is just that bad. And I don't think Chris Barnett's going to land like a spinning wheel kick and knock him out like he did to, John Vellante or whatever. Hamdi's probably not going to get hit with that. At minus 350, though, I mean, it's probably fine. Honestly, like, how does Hamdi lose this fight? I guess just being an idiot? He could just be an idiot and lose the fight, but he's probably going to be the better striker, better wrestler, should be better everywhere. Give me Hamdi for the early pick. Featherweight bout, a much better fight here than the one we just talked about. Jose Delgado taking on Nathaniel Wood. I actually love this matchup. Perfect matchmaking, in my opinion. Nathaniel Wood comes in as the underdog after a nice performance his last time out against Morgan Charrier. Honestly, just looked maybe career best against Morgan Charrier. Jose Delgado, maybe career best as well in a real quick knockout against Hyder Emil. I think that was on the Topuria Oliveira pay-per-view in June. So quick knockout for him. He turns around, flies over to Abu Dhabi to take on another, he's not a young prospect, but his nickname was the Prospect. I think he changed it. Good for him. But he's a guy that was fighting at 135, moved up to 145, kind of reinvigorated his career, but at 145, he's clearly smaller than a lot of these guys, but he is very skilled. He's very skilled, and I think that makes up for the lack of size in a lot of these matchups. In this matchup, he's going to be severely outsized. 5 inches in height, 4 inches in reach, and Delgado is not only tall and lengthy, but he's a very good athlete, and he's very fast. I think Delgado probably has more upside to finish this fight. We've seen Nathaniel Wood hurt in a couple fights, and I think if Delgado hits him with the right shot early on, that could be it. But if the fight extends, it could turn into, who has the better skill set, because Delgado's going to be very dangerous early on, and I don't expect him to fall off a cliff after round 1. But I do think Nathaniel Wood's a guy that kind of needs to build into the fight, kind of get his reads, and he's still dangerous himself early on. But Nathaniel Wood, I think, is going to be a little bit outclassed in round 1. And then in round 2, if he can start to slow down Delgado, maybe make him work with some counters, then he can start to get his game going. But I got to go with Delgado here. I think he's going to be the front runner, bigger guy, taller, longer, fast, athletic, young as well, still improving, training out of MMA labs. There's just a lot to like with Delgado. So I'm going to take him for the early pick. I'm going to go back and watch some more film on both of these guys just to kind of solidify it. But I think Delgado is just a very tough matchup for Nathaniel Wood in this one. Give me Delgado for the early pick. All right, now we got some heavyweights. Walter Walker was supposed to fight Muhammad Usman in Rio 2 weeks ago, and Louis Sutherland was supposed to fight Justin Tafa in Perth 3 weeks ago, I think it was, or maybe 4. So now both of those fights get canceled, and now they're fighting each other in Abu Dhabi. I think it makes a lot of sense. I'm down for it. Walter Walker comes in at minus 310. Louis Sutherland plus 260. Louis is going to have a much tougher fight here against Walter Walker than Justin Tafa. And maybe it's an easier fight for Walter Walker compared to Muhammad Usman, especially if Usman was on, those steroids that we were seeing the reason that he had to pull out with. But I think it might be a little bit easier for Walter Walker than Muhammad Usman, because Louis Sutherland, I don't think, really offers a ton of athleticism. I don't really think he offers a ton of wrestling resistance. I don't think he's a great striker either. I just think Muhammad Usman was probably a slight step above Louis Sutherland. But Louis, what does he do well? I think he's just tough. I think he has decent cardio for a heavyweight. I don't think his striking is very good. I think it's pretty stiff. And I just don't really know what he does all that well. We know Walter Walker, what he wants to do is take you down and look for that heel hook. But I also think he could just win a 15-minute decision here if he doesn't get the heel hook. He was telling everybody that he wasn't going to go for the heel hook against Muhammad Usman, but what is he going to tell us this week against Louis Sutherland? I assume he's probably going to roll for a heel hook at least once. I think Walter Walker gets this one done. Minus 310 is, never great for heavyweight, but I really think Walter Walker is probably better everywhere in this fight. And Walter looked in insane shape leading up to that Muhammad Usman fight. Nothing like he looks in this picture. He looked absolutely ripped. So if he is, taking that nutrition seriously, and he's, getting himself a little bit lighter, more primed to go 15 minutes hard, I think he gets this one done. Give me Walter Walker for the early pick. Lightweights here. We got Mateus Camilo coming in at minus 110, taking on Abdul Karim Al-Selwady. Now, Al-Selwady comes in here 0-1 in the UFC, not 2-1. So both guys are 0-1. Mateus Camilo 0-1, coming off the submission loss to Gabe Green, where I was actually at that fight at the Apex, and Camilo almost submitted him with a triangle. Almost submitted him with a triangle in round 2, I think it was. And then I think he gassed himself out going for that triangle. And Gabe Green, being the cardio monster that he is, gets to the back, chokes him out. Good to see for him. His family was right in front of me. And Gabe Green's he had a young, I think it was a young baby. I forget what the gender was. But he had a young baby in the crowd there, headphones on. And so it was good to see him get a win. And Mateus Camilo is 24, so for him to lose his UFC debut, it's not the worst look by any means. Especially, he had a lot of success in that fight as well. He did get dropped early in the fight, I think, though. Abdul Karim Selwady got a UFC contract from the Dana White Contender Series where he beat George Hardwick as a plus 400 underdog. and really he just outworked him for like 3 minutes. So he gets the contract. He fights Lloyd Rajabov in the UFC debut. Competitive fight, round 3, he gets caught and gets knocked out. Selwady's all 4 of his losses come by KO, and I think this guy is pretty fragile, but he's not like the worst fighter. He's not the worst fighter. I think he's decently skilled. He's got good cardio. I think his striking is solid. I think his wrestling is okay. But when you're fighting at lightweight and you're going up against the guy, Matheus Camilo, who does have some pretty solid power, is a younger fighter, probably the better athlete here, definitely chiseled up for the weight class. I think it's going to be a tough ask for Selwady to go in there and like outpoint him for 15 minutes. I do think if Selwady could get some grappling going, that's obviously been the fault for Camilo. All 3 of his losses come by submission. But I don't really see Selwady as some guy that's going to take you down and submit you or grind you out on the ground, really. I think Camilo's probably going to get this one done. I think he's the much more dangerous striker on the feet. He's the younger guy. I think he's more durable on the feet. I think he's improving his jiu-jitsu game. We saw him go for that triangle against Gabe Green. Almost got it. We also saw him go for a triangle in his fight before that. Don't love to see him going up for submissions off his back, but at least that means he's going for something. Even if he doesn't get the submission, he could create a scramble off that, get back up to his feet. I just think Camilo's the more primed guy to make a run in the UFC at this point, and I think he can win this fight. So I'm going to take Matheus Camilo for the early pick. Don't love that, El Selwady is he reps the Palestine flag and we're taking a Brazilian in Abu Dhabi. So don't love that, but I do think he's the better fighter at this point as he's got a lot of more upside. So I'm going to take him for the early pick. Ludovit Klein coming in at minus 135, taking on Mateusz Rebecki, sitting at plus 115. Quick turnaround for Rebecki after that banger of a fight he had with Chris Duncan. I mean, that wasn't really that long ago. I think it was like, August? I want to say it was August, maybe late July. But either way, he's fighting a lot quicker than Duncan is. And Ludovit Klein coming off a loss as well against Mateusz Gamrot. So he already lost to one Mateusz. Now he gets the second one. But Mateusz Rebecki is a much different fighter. Rebecki and Ludovit Klein are kind of the short kings at 155 at 5'7", but they pack a lot of punch. They pack a lot of heart. And I think this should be a war. I think this should be a real war. We got Rebecki with a 66-inch reach. And if Ludovit Klein really does have a 72.5-inch reach, that is insane. He does have some long arms. That could be an error, but I think that might be correct. 72.5-inch reach. Wow. I think Ludovit Klein is the cleaner striker here, but I honestly don't really trust him to win a war of attrition. Yeah, I think Ludovit Klein is definitely going to be able to make Rebecki pay early on, but Rebecki just keeps coming. He just keeps coming. The problem, pause. He just keeps walking forward is what I'm trying to say. Rebecki gasses, though. And when he gasses, he's not death gassed, but he definitely slows down. His defense gets even worse than what it is in round 1. But he just keeps walking forward. And I think in his mind, he's like, I just got to keep walking forward and it will work out. But every time he did that against Duncan, Duncan would just make him pay. Even when they're both tired, and Rebecki's literally just walking into strikes, whether it's a knee up the middle, an elbow, he just keeps walking into stuff. And I think Ludovit Klein just stays calm. He should be the more technical guy here and just continue to make Rebecki pay, because we know Rebecki's just going to keep walking forward. He could mix in some takedowns here against Klein, and I think he's probably going to get a couple, but I don't know that he's going to just wet blanket Klein like Gamrot did in that fight. It was a bad look, though, for Klein to get wet blanketed by Gamrot. Gamrot's not really the best control guy. I think this could be a 50-50 fight, but I do trust Klein to be a little bit more clean in the striking. I think his cardio might be a little bit better, but we've never really seen him in a just dog fight, and that's what Rebecki's going to give you. I remember cashing Rebecki by decision against Oralby, last year? I think it was last year on the Abu Dhabi card, because Rebecki was plus 300. I think his decision line was plus 600, or maybe plus 650. And I know Oralby's tough. but Rebecki is just going to fucking go for it. And that could happen here, man. That could definitely happen here. Let's not forget Rebecki was minus 200 in that fight against Chris Duncan. So this could be a 50-50 fight. I am going to pick Ludwig Klein for the early pick right now because I think he might be a little bit cleaner. And I think Rebecki, quick turnaround, could spell some bad juju going in there. Maybe he gets clipped with a big shot, gets rocked early, gets KO'd. But I'm going to take Klein for the early pick. Love the fight, though. It's going to be sick. All right, middleweight bout here. We got Ikram Aliskerov coming in minus 270, taking on Jun Young Park coming in at plus 230. It's a good fight as well. I think there's a lot of great matchups on this card. Main card, prelims. There's a lot of good matchmaking and some like solid fighters that are always fun to watch. Ikram Aliskerov is fun to watch because he finishes a lot of his fights, and there is also like some question about him as well. Like, he's a guy that's from Dagestan, Russian prospect, got knocked out by Khamzat Chimaev. That was his only loss before Robert Whittaker did it to him on a short notice main event spot. But, his wins in the UFC aren't really like amazing. He's knocking out Muniz, he's knocking out Worley Alves, Phil Hawes. Like, two of those guys are just extremely chinny, and Worley Alves is like 80 years old. So his wins in the UFC like really aren't that great. But you can tell there's, a lot of potential there. Jun Young Park is kind of the opposite. Like, he's not going out there finishing guys early, but he's always going to give you 15 minutes of solid cardio. He can mix in some takedowns. He's going to be tough as shit. I mean, he got kneed to the dome in his last fight against Nardiev, and I think probably could have taken a DQ, but he continued the fight and won the fight. I think they took, 2 points for that knee or something like that? Crazy stuff. But he's a dog at plus 230. It's tempting. It's tempting because Park is going to have a great pace. He can grapple pretty dang well. My worry here would be if Ikram comes in this fight with a grappling-heavy game plan, and Park's not the best off his back. His defensive grappling can be exploited. That's how he lost the fight to Muniz, where Muniz went in there and just says, I'm bigger than you. I'm going to try to take you down. I'm probably going to take you down. And if you get back up, I'm just going to hold on to you, maybe take you down again. And Park just really couldn't get anything going and still almost won the fight. It was a split decision. There's a lot of dog in Jun Young Park, which I love. I haven't had a lot of success with these South Korean guys, but there's been one consistent South Korean. All right, and that's the Iron Turtle. I am going to lean towards the dog here in Jun Young Park at plus 230. Because I think that line is just a little bit too wide. I'm going to go back and watch some stuff. The thing is with Park, he is kind of hittable. So, I mean, if Ikram does have, some nasty power, he could hurt Park early and the fight could be over. But I think if the fight does extend, I don't really think Ikram's grappling is like all that insane. I don't really think it's on the level of like what an elite Dagestan wrestler would be. I guess we haven't really seen it too much in the UFC, but it's an interesting one. I'm going to lean towards the dog here in Jun Young Park. I just know he's got a good cardio. I know he's tough. I know he's got good volume. I know he's never going to stop, working. And even if he does get taken out, he's not going to stop working. And if he does take you down, he is a workhorse on top. So give me Park for the early pick. But before we move on, I will say this. The worst thing you could do when you're betting on an Abu Dhabi card is to fade the OVs. And so, yeah, Park at plus 230 might look like value, but it probably turns out to be a loser. I'll get back to you guys on what I'm actually going to pick in my most confident pick video later in the week. But for now, I'm going to lean towards the underdog in Jun Young Park. All right, lightweight bout here. We got Nasrat Haqparast coming in at minus 130, taking on Quillan Salkilld at plus 110. Short notice fight here, short notice matchup put together. I think Nasrat was looking to be on this card, but they couldn't really get him a fighter. So they called it Quillan Salkilld, and Salkild's 2-0 in the UFC. He's 25 years of age, and Nasrat's 5-0 in his last 5. He's on a nice long streak. Won a split against Ribovic, won a split against Jared Gordon. So this is kind of like a risk. This is a bit of a risk for Nasrat. He's on a nice streak. He's beating guys that are UFC veterans in Jared Gordon. And he beat Esteban Ribovic, who was just coming off a big win at Noche UFC against Zal Huber and had a good amount of hype on himself in that fight as well. So Salkilld is kind of giving an opportunity here to spoil the show for Nasrat, but it is on short notice, and it's in enemy territory. Yeah, it's in enemy territory for Salkilld. So there's a good amount going against Salkilld in this matchup that I don't like. I think Salkilld could come in here and give Nasrat some fits in the grappling, but I don't know that he's going to keep it there long enough. I think Nasrat on the feet is probably a little bit sharper. I do think Salkilld is a good striker, so I think on the feet it could be competitive. I would just give the edge slightly to Nasrat. In the grappling, I think Salkild's got it there. I just don't know how long he's going to be able to keep it there. And in his last fight against Ash Moose, he was working him in rounds 1 and 2, and then in round 3, it started to look a little sketchy. So short notice in enemy territory, if he doesn't get him out of there round 1 or 2, round 3 could start to look sketchy. Nasrat's not like the biggest power puncher ever, but he does have solid cardio. He's definitely the UFC veteran in this spot. I'm going to lean towards Nasrat here at minus 130 for the early pick, because I do think, the more preparation in an area that's beneficial to him and more UFC experience. I think it's just a tough ask for Salkilld, but I'm going to go back and watch the film on this one, see how Nasrat does with a guy that is going to look to try to grapple, which I think Salkilld will. And if there's any holes, then maybe, Salkilld as the underdog might be the spot. But for now, Nasrat is the early pick. All right, before we get into the main card, I want to remind you, if you want all my bets, jump with Home of 5 Picks Premium membership. Link down in the description below. We won 10 straight UFC events. I think earlier the year we won like 8 in a row. We've been having a great year, man. We've been having a great year. Positive 75.52 units, 10 straight UFC events profited in a row. Link down in the description below to get all the bets. All right, light heavyweight bout here to start off the main card, and I love it. I love this match. Alexander Rakic coming in at minus 110, and on the other side as well is Azimaz Murzakanov coming in at minus 110. So a pick-em fight here. Undefeated fighter in Murzakanov. I've always thought this guy was freaking good, dude. I always thought Murzakanov was nasty, but he just rarely fights, dude. I think he's probably just having injury concerns, or it's probably got to be injuries, right? He's 36. But he's 15-0, and 11 of his wins come by knockout. This guy's just very clean. Southpaw striker, smaller for the weight class at 5'10", but he's like a little fire hydrant, extremely fast too. I don't know how you could be that fast at 36 years of age. Like, the dude is extremely quick, and his left hand is nasty. It is deadly. If he lands that left hand, like, he hurts almost everybody that he fights, and he's coming off an easy KO win against Ribeiro, knocked out Menefield, nearly knocked out Jacoby, flying knee against Chukwe. Like, this dude is extremely fast. The problem is he does tend to lose minutes at range, because if he's not landing the big shot, he's not like a guy that fills the space very well. And how could he? He's 5'10". Now he's taking on Alexander Rakic, who's 6'4", a specimen of a human being. Like, the guy is an absolute unit. And he's fallen on some hard times. He's 2-3 in his last 5. The knee injury to Blachowicz, that kept him out for a while. Then he comes back and fights Yuri. It looks amazing. And then he gets melted by Yuri, kind of like a lot of people do, in round 2. And kind of just got broken in that fight. And then he fights Ankalaev, wins the first round against Ankalaev. And then in rounds 2 and 3, he gets worked on the feet. Not necessarily worked, but he lost the next 2 rounds in that fight. So those are 3 of like the best fighters in the light heavyweight division. And Murzakanov hasn't fought anybody like that. And Rakic has, but he hasn't been coming up with those wins. So it's kind of, what do you like more? Do you like that Rakic is fighting the better level of competition and being somewhat competitive and showing good flashes, but losing? Or do you like Murzakanov running through these guys in the lower part of the weight class, or at least towards the outside of the top 10, between the top 10 and the top 20 of the division? But he's also had some competitive fights as well. So personally, I think Murzakanov can definitely hurt Rakic in this fight, but I don't know that he's going to knock him out. I don't think Rakic has a terrible chin. I think he can be hurt. He can be cracked. But from range, Rakic's leg kicks are disgusting. His body kick is disgusting. He moves well. I think Rakic is going to be winning this fight until he doesn't. I think Murzakanov can find the shot. But if he can't find the shot, he's going to lose. It's as binary as that. That's why I think it's probably a 50-50. It's like, well, if Murzakanov can't knock him out, then I think he probably loses. But he could also hurt him in 2 of the 3 rounds and win that way. Kind of like when you think back to the Dustin Jacoby versus Alonzo Menefield fight, where Jacoby was winning majority of the fight. It's just he got hurt in 2 of the rounds. He got hurt once in 2 of the rounds, and Menefield won those 2 rounds that he hurt him in. It could be the same thing here. But it's a 50-50 fight, and I think I'm going to lean towards the guy that's going to win the minutes here in Alexander Rakic. He's also younger. It's a close fight, though. It's a very close fight. I'm going to lean towards Rakic for now. Go back and watch some film. Maybe look at the recent form if Murzakanov seems super locked in, because he's got to go now. He's 36, and it's not super old for the light heavyweight division, but he's 36. He's undefeated. He's clearly got to go now, and if he can't get past Rakic, it's probably over. You're not going to get to a title if you lose to Rakic, but Rakic could definitely rebound here. Give me Rakic for the early pick. Close fight, though. Could see it either way. Got to do some more tape study on that one. All right, we go to the heavyweights. We got Jailton Almeida coming in at -180, taking on Alexander Volkov. Volkov comes in off the loss last December against Cyril Gane, where he arguably should have won, and arguably could be having his rematch against Tom Aspinall in the main event. So a lot of motivation, I would say, in the eyes of Alexander Volkov, who comes in as the underdog. Jailton Almeida, of course, going to have a lot of motivation as well, because he hasn't fought for a title yet. And he was a guy that was kind of looked at as the next guy up until he lost to Curtis Blades. And since then, he's had a couple of victories. But he comes in as the favorite, which to me was kind of shocking. I don't want to say he should have been the dog, but I also think this fight is pretty close. I don't really see Volkov as a guy that's going to just get taken down and choked out real quickly. The only guy that's really done that was Tom Aspinall. It wasn't a choke. It was an straight arm lock. But that was also before Volkov really worked on his grappling. And the problem here is I do think Almeida is going to get him down, and I do think he's probably going to get him down early and could maybe get him out in some bad spots early. But I do think Volkov keeps his range extremely well. The Volkov has actually just been very good at facing big power punchers and being longer and avoiding big shots. That's kind of how he's won most of his fights at a high level in his heavyweight career. He's extremely tall for the weight class. He's long. He has good footwork. He's extremely experienced. He's only been knocked out twice in his 49 fight MMA career at heavyweight. That's absurd. That's unreal. So Almeida's not a guy that's really going in there looking for the knockout. He's looking to take you down and submit you. So on second thought, I kind of get why Almeida is the favorite, but I don't know if he's going to get him out of there. In a 3-round fight, I guess, Almeida could just win the first 2 and, survive the third. But I don't think Volkov's going to let him off easy. Volkov's a guy that still does have power. He's got good kicks from range as well, good front kicks. And if you get tired on Volkov, he's going to make you pay for it. I'll never forget when he fought Alexander Romanov, and Romanov looked for a takedown early on in the fight. Volkov definitely grabbed the cage for one, so he's willing to cheat. Good for Volkov. Grabbed the cage, stuffed the takedown, and I think Volkov hit him with one kick to the body, and Romanov just folded, just gave up. Almeida's probably not going to do that, but we're also, Almeida took down Blades, 9 times in round 1, and then in round 2, he fails it, gets elbowed to the head, fight's over. Almeida's so good on the ground, he's able to exploit a lot of these lower-level heavyweights, and he's a good athlete, so he's able to get away with a lot of stuff. I do think his striking is not bad. It's just I don't know that he's going to win minutes at range against a guy like Volkov. He's probably not, so he's got to get the fight to the ground. I think he's going to get the fight to the ground early on, but I don't know if he's going to finish him. Because I think Volkov's definitely worked a lot on his ground game. And he's faced the best of the best. Arguably should have beat Cyril Gane. Much different matchup. But I am going to lean towards Almeida for the early pick. His finishing upside here for a heavyweight that's that good of a grappler is big. But I also think if the fight does extend, gets into round 2, Almeida can't get those takedowns, or maybe he's not having the success that he wants to, then he might fold. So maybe it's a good live bet spot on Volkov, after round 1. But for now, I'm going to lean towards Almeida for the early pick. It's a good matchup. I do think the line could be a little bit closer, though. I think it could maybe be like Almeida minus 140, minus 130. But I'm going to take him for the early pick nonetheless. Going on to the feature bout of the night, we got the bantamweights here. Mario Bautista, everybody's favorite fighter, taking on Umar Nurmagomedov, coming at minus 450. Bautista plus 350. Dang. Bautista 16-2 in his professional career. Umar suffered his first loss. So a guy that is coming off the first loss of his career last time out to none other than Merab Dvalishvili. And a fight that he broke his hand in, from what we were told, in round 1. And arguably still could have won the fight. I don't think he should have won the fight. Some people will say otherwise. I think Merab won the 3rd, 4th, and the 5th. But Umar, I think, cleanly won the first 2. So that says a lot. And if you're fighting with a broken hand, it's going to be tough to win a fight with a broken hand, unless you're Merab and you win a fight against Petr Yan with a broken hand and you 50-45. Umar, just not Merab. It's just not Merab. But is he going to be able to win this fight against Mario Bautista is probably what you want to hear. I think he is. I think he's, I don't want to say a good enough striker, but I think he's the slightly better striker than Mario. I think Mario is very good at pacing guys. I think he's very good at throwing a lot of volume, but he's not a guy that's going to sit down on his punches. And I think to beat Umar, I think you got to at least hurt him, or you got to be able to out-wrestle him. Like what Merab did in that fight against Umar was essentially out-wrestled him and hurt him on the feet. So is Mario Bautista going to be able to do that? I don't really think so. I think Umar Nurmagomedov is going to come in here, probably get some takedowns. Damon Blackshear was able to take down Mario Bautista. Didn't put him in any terrible positions, but was still able to mix it in. I think he's probably going to be able to get some takedowns here against Mario. I think on the feet, his movement is extremely, extremely good. I think Bautista could make it somewhat close, but I think Umar's just going to get it done. It's going to be really tough for Bautista to get a decision in Abu Dhabi against Umar Nurmagomedov. Let's be real. Mario Bautista's up against a lot here going into Abu Dhabi against a guy with the last name Nurmagomedov. So at minus 450, is it worth it? I don't know. That's up to you, but I think Umar gets it done. All right, co-main event. We got the strawweight title on the line. We got Jandiroba coming in at plus 115, taking on Mackenzie Dern at minus 135. Mackenzie Dern did win the first fight between these two, and my girl Verna is going to take that personally coming into this one against Mackenzie Dern. I've been a big fan of Verna Jandiroba because she's made me a lot of money. I backed her in a lot of fights, and she's come through. She's never really that big of a favorite. And she's been a dog a couple times as well. I think there's a lot to like with Verna Jandiroba. But the problem is she's going up against another grappler. I think both of these ladies have kind of benefited from fighting other girls that aren't as good of grapplers as them, and they're able to be the better grappler in these fights and win that way. But now it's grappler versus grappler. So how does the fight play out? We've already seen the fight play out, and what happened in that fight was it was a lot of striking. They didn't really engage too much in the grappling, and Verna wasn't really wanting to engage in the grappling. So in this one, I kind of expect Verna to engage in the grappling because, you worked your way to a title using your grappling, and now just because you're going up against another grappler, you're just not going to use what got you there. Kind of doesn't make sense to me. So I think Verna's going to look to grapple here. I mean, she's 14-0 to the submission. 14-0 to the submission. And Mackenzie Dern's 8-0. So obviously these girls are extremely good on the ground. They're finishers on the ground, but they're also very good defensively. So in a 5-round fight, I think Mackenzie Dern has shown that she can go 5 rounds. Verna Jandiroba, on the other hand, in the 5-rounders that she's been in, she's getting finishes. So can't really say that. I think it's just very tough for me to fade Verna because I know Verna's an extremely good grappler. I know her striking isn't amazing, but it's somewhat serviceable. But the thing is against Mackenzie Dern is Dern's not going to be afraid to get taken down, so she's probably going to be able to let her hands go, let her kicks go, more than a lot of Verna's other opponents. A lot of these other opponents, like Yan Xiaonan, like Amanda Lemos, they're scared to let their hands go because they don't want to get taken down. Because if Virna gets close to you, she will just latch onto you and she will take you down. She will create a scramble, and then you're grappling, and she's the better grappler. I don't think Mackenzie's going to be afraid of that. So I think Mackenzie could win some minutes on the feet. But when the fight does hit the ground, it's going to be tough for me to say that Virna out-grapples Mackenzie Dern. It's going to be really tough for me to say that. I really want to go with Virna here, and I'm going to go back and watch some film. I think Virna has improved since that first fight. But she hasn't really beaten any other girls that are like good grapplers. You look at her losses, it's Mackenzie Dern, who's a great grappler, Amanda Ribas, great grappler, Carlos Esparza, good grappler as well. So I got to go with Mackenzie Dern here for the early pick, but I will say this, rematches in MMA, they're not always the same, especially when they were 5 years ago. So I'll take Mackenzie Dern for the early pick, but I'm definitely going to go back and watch some film on this one because I'm not going to overlook my girl Virna anymore, because I did at first, but once I got on the train, she made me some money. Let's move on to the main event. We got the heavyweight title on the line. We got Tommy Aspinall coming in at -370. Ciryl Gane comes in at +295. Ciryl coming off the very close victory to Alexander Volkov in a fight where maybe people think Volkov should have won, and we talked about Volkov a little bit earlier, but I think Volkov probably should have won as well. Ciryl Gane is, all skills aside, this guy has severely benefited from being from France and being a heavyweight that actually has skills, because this is his, third undisputed title fight? Third? Yeah, third undisputed title fight. He lost to Francis Ngannou in an undisputed title fight, lost to John Jones in an undisputed title fight, and this is his third one. And he did have an interim championship win against Derek Lewis, but it's fucking Derek Lewis, dude. Like, Derek Lewis was never going to win that fight. Tommy Aspinall, I really want this guy to win, so it's going to be tough for me to get through my bias here. But if I do try to put my bias aside, there are some red flags that you could say for Tom Aspinall. He's -370, so he's a big favorite. I definitely think he's got more finishing upside. I think he's the better grappler. I think he's the more dangerous striker. But the thing with Ciryl Gane is he's an extremely good athlete. He's extremely good footwork. Rarely does he get touched up, like on the feet. The only guy that touched him up on the feet was fucking Tai Tuivasa, which was just insane. But he's extremely good footwork, pretty solid striking defense. His grappling is not the best, but we've seen some improvements. I think Volkov, the thing is, I don't want to say we've seen some improvements, like we kind of have. I think it's just like we've seen more confidence in it in his last fight against Volkov, where he was like willing to exchange in some of these things, but he just shouldn't be there. He shouldn't be in the grappling. He should be on the outside, throwing his jabs. He's got extremely good jabs. Throwing his jabs, throwing his teep kicks, his leg kicks, and just using his athleticism from the outside. And he's got really good cardio. He could do that for 25 minutes. He could probably do that for 40 minutes. So if Tom Aspinall's not able to finish him early on in this fight, then what does the next 3 rounds look like? It probably looks like Ciryl Gane getting the better of the exchanges. Now, that's mostly based on what we've seen from Ciryl Gane and kind of what we haven't seen from Tom Aspinall. We haven't seen him past the second round, so we don't really know what it looks like. So there are some red flags with Tommy Aspinall -370, but I will say this. I think Ciryl Gane I think he locks in when he has like a title fight. When he has a title fight, he locks in. He seems locked in for this fight. So does Tom. I think Tom Aspinall is going to find the chin, though. I think he's going to find the chin. I think Ciryl Gane is a guy that hasn't faced another extremely good athlete like this in Tom Aspinall and won the fight that way. Like, Volkov is a good athlete, but not on the athleticism of Tom Aspinall. When you look at him fighting good athletes like Francis Ngannou, like John Jones, he's losing. All right? When he's facing Tai Tuivasa, of course he's going to win. When he's facing Derek Lewis, of course he's going to win. But Tom Aspinall is an extremely good athlete, and I think Tom Aspinall is going to be able to find that chin. I think he's probably going to be able to hurt him. Could maybe submit him on the ground, but I think he does get the finish within the first 2 rounds. I want to take Tommy Aspinall for the early pick, but I will tell you this, -370 on Tommy Aspinall could start to look bad. It could start to look bad if the fight does extend. I think he gets it done, though. Tommy Aspinall, undisputed heavyweight champion. John Jones is just waiting for this fight to go the other way and Cyril Gane to get the victory. But I don't think it's going to happen. Give me Tommy Aspinall for the early pick. That's going to do it for the video. I appreciate you for watching. Like the video for me before you go. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Until next time, hey, Job Picks.